Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex and my co-host Anthony Rivardo here. Today we're talking Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson, two big men in the Giants defense that, we need to retain. These are two key pieces and key cogs in the run-stopping game. They put pressure on. It's a big deal for them to try and retain both of them, but of course, there is the possibility that they only keep one of them. But before we dive into everything, I want to give you my joke of the day. This one is courtesy of Jack Roop from our comment section on YouTube. He has a really good one today. What are the I can't even get through it. What do the Dallas Cowboys and a Chick-fil-A manager have in common? What do you think, Anthony?
I already read the comment, so I know. But
pretend like you don't know what it is.
I don't know. What do they have in common?
Neither one shows up for work on Sunday. Boom. Not bad, Jack. Not bad. I appreciate the originality. And if anybody else has any jokes they want to drop in the comment section, I'm going to be reading them live, as well as coming up with my own when people don't drop them. So I really appreciate the love and all the support you guys giving us there and keeping this tradition of jokes going along, because it's one of my favorite parts of every video. So I like the originality that people give. But as always, guys, Anthony, how are you doing, my friend, before we dive into this video and, how the Giants can retain both and if they really should in the first place?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk about that. I think this is a really fun and interesting topic. I think it's pretty multi-layered, so I'm excited to get into that. But I'll first say that was a pretty solid joke. I'm the tough critic here. Usually I'm not satisfied by the jokes. I didn't really laugh when I heard you say it, but that's because I read it the other day, and I did chuckle while reading it on my iPhone the other day. So
I blame Jack.
It was a pretty solid one.
Not my fault.
It was a good one. It was a funny joke. So respect, Jack. Good job.
Yeah, so today we're talking Dalvin, talking Leonard, and these are two players, like I mentioned before, really big pieces to this Giants defense. And the question is, can we retain both and should we retain both? Because the Giants don't have a ton of cap space to work with this offseason. And as you know, the cap is supposed to go down. Even Dave Gettleman said during his postseason press conference, the one that he actually does every year, that they expect it to potentially go down to $175 million, which would be about a $23 million drop-off, which, they have to figure out ways to work around that. One way they did that with Logan Ryan's contract is they backloaded it to the second year, and his cap hit for next season is only going to be about $7 million, and then it's going to be $10 million from there on out, a little bit more. So that's one way that they tried to scoot around the cap going down in 2021. But when it comes to Leonard Williams, he could be making upwards of $19-20 million per year. That's more than Chris Jones is making. It's going to be a big payday for him. It just depends on the Giants feel that they can actually delve out that kind of cash and if he's worth the money. We're going to talk about that, his production, if he's worth it. But also Dalvin Tomlinson, another guy who's been, homegrown with the Giants. He's coming off his rookie contract. Everybody loves him. Good guy in the locker room. He's a really strong presence in the run game and stopping the run specifically. So, he's a guy I would love to keep if we have the money for it. But again, it's going to be tough to keep both. They might have to make a sacrifice there. It's like you might have to say, is it Dalvin Tomlinson or is it a receiver? That's basically the argument that we have to have, because there's no way they're signing Leonard Williams, Dalvin Tomlinson, and signing a guy like Allen Robinson, Corey Davis, Kenny Golladay. I just don't see it happening. It's really, there's going to have to be a trade-off. And I'm in the boat that the cap space is actually flexible and it's fluid. You can find ways to manipulate the cap, but considering it's going down so much this year, you have to bite the bullet on one side of it. It's either Dalvin or it's a wide receiver, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to be as easy as most people think it's going to be to just sign whoever we want without having to let some guys go. But Anthony, what do you think this comes down to? Do you think that they should pay Dalvin, or do you think they pay Dexter, or do you think they find a way to get both?
I think, ideally I would like to keep both players. I think they both provide so much in the running game. And then Leonard Williams also stepping up his game this season and providing so much in, as a pass rusher. And Dalvin Tomlinson is a player who's just been consistent. He hasn't missed a game in his career. He's been here week in, week out, and he's provided, consistent, high-quality performances, especially in the running game. And then to build on that, he's actually shown a lot of improvements over the past 2 years, as a pass rusher. And he's just getting better and better. And, when somebody's just continuing to improve every year, you want to keep that guy around. So I think it's really important that they do keep both players, especially when you look at Patrick Graham's scheme. Leonard Williams is a perfect scheme fit for Patrick Graham's defense. And, we know that because we saw him break out and have an 11.5 sack season this year, while playing with Patrick Graham after, putting up a half of a sack, I think it was, with James Betcher through 8 games. That's pretty lousy right there. But in terms of how well he's been generating pressures ever since he got here and being a leader on the Giants defense, Leonard Williams has done all of those things, and he's done them to, some of the highest ability possible. So in terms of having those two as leaders in a young defense, I think it's very important to keep them around for that. But then, Dalvin just improving year to year. He's still not at his fullest potential. Like, he's still growing and getting better. And another thing is, with Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson, I don't think they have success without each other. Like, I think that it goes hand in hand, having both of those guys plus Dexter Lawrence on the defensive line. It opens up a lot of one-on-one blocks for guys who shouldn't have one-on-one blocks. Like Leonard Williams should probably be double-teamed every play, but sometimes, you line him up in a certain spot and Dexter Lawrence is having a good game and they have to double him, or, vice versa, and it opens things up for the other players. So I think keeping those two together and having a really strong defensive line, and Dexter, Dalvin, and Leonard, just keeping all of that consistent and keeping that continuity going into next season, I think that we can see these players get even better and just continue to grow and build. And I think it's imperative that we keep them together.
See, I completely agree, and I kind of want to build off the Leonard Williams train a little bit too, because when it comes to Williams, he had his breakout season this year. Like, we know this. He had 57 combined tackles. He had 30 quarterback hits, career high, and 11.5 sacks, another career high, and the first time he's reached double-digit sacks, in his career. So those are two major things. He had 14 tackles for a loss, another career high, and that attests to what you said before. He is just so good in Patrick Graham's scheme because Patrick Graham utilizes his defensive linemen very, very interestingly. He moves them around into different techniques. We saw Leonard Williams play the 2 technique, 3 technique, a little bit of 5. He can be a defensive end. And then you have Dalvin Tomlinson, who plays over the nose. He's playing a 0 technique over the center. He plays 1 technique. He's really trying to soak up those guards and those centers, trying to occupy them and allow those 1v1 matchups on the outside. But I actually saw a really interesting chart that will open your eyes to this. The guy who got doubled the most in 2020 was actually Dexter Lawrence. He commanded the most double teams out of all 3 interior defenders for the Giants. The second place guy was Dalvin Tomlinson. And now the third place guy was Leonard Williams. I found that very interesting because that doesn't necessarily tell me that opposing defenses aren't doubling Leonard Williams. What it really tells me is that Patrick Graham is finding ways to get Leonard Williams into 1v1 matchups. That's what it's telling me. Because obviously Leonard Williams is their best pass rusher on the interior and is their best player there. But the way he's getting sacks, he's winning 1v1 matchups. And he's getting opposing defenses to be swallowed up by guys like Dalvin Tomlinson, guys like Dexter Lawrence. He's scheming. This is the whole point of schematics and why Patrick Graham is so beloved right now in our fan base. He's finding ways to scheme open guys like Leonard Williams in those 1v1 matchups. That's what makes him such a great defensive coordinator, especially when your outside linebacker corps is shredded and you're down to 7th round picks like Carter Coughlin and practice squad guys like Jabal Shared. You need to have other guys making plays, and the way he schemed Leonard Williams to 1v1 matchups was simply brilliant. That is why he's a must keep, because 1 year of experience, and I actually made this argument the other day. I think personally, with 1 year of experience, if they manage to retain all these defenders, Logan, Dexter, and not Dexter, but Dalvin and Leonard, if they manage to retain all those guys, 1 year of experience, and let's say the offense takes a step forward to average. All we need them to be is average. Our defense is a top 5 unit. And why? Because they're not going to be on the field as much. They actually finished 12th in overall rankings this past season. They were 12th. But if they're not on the field nearly as much, they have 1 year of experience in a scheme. They upgrade at CB2. You're talking about a unit that is going to be very, very good. Like, so good that they will carry the Giants to the playoffs. They just need an average offense to get it done on that side of the ball. But I think keeping those 2 guys is imperative. If it comes down to it, it's really going to come down to getting a wide receiver at number 11 in the draft. That's where I think they're headed with this. And, I'm going to do a video about Pat Freiermuth, a second-round tight end who I think could be a really, really, really good pick for the Giants. Everyone's clamoring on about Kyle Pitts, but this kid, Pat Freiermuth, do not sleep on him. He's been like my dream tight end picks. I've spoken to Anthony about this weeks ago, about Pat Freiermuth. I told him, this kid is special. He can be Travis Kelce. He can be George Kittle for the Giants. He has a lot of room. He's 6'5", 258 pounds. The guy's a beast. And he's a quintessential pass-catching tight end. He's the modern-day tight end that they're looking for. And if Jason Garrett stays, he's the perfect guy. But when it comes to those two guys, Dalvin Tomlinson and Leonard Williams, I do want to play the other side of the spectrum, right? I don't want to say, they have to keep Dalvin, they have to keep Leonard. I do want to make an argument against it. And my argument against it would be, I think Dexter Lawrence can replicate Dalvin Tomlinson's statistics quite easily. I think Dexter's going to take a big jump in year 3. He already was double-teamed the most of any interior defender in year 2, and he actually looked pretty good. He soaked up 4 sacks, 53 combined tackles, 10 quarterback hits, and he didn't even play all of the snaps. He only played in 60% of defensive snaps, so that says a lot about his usage, because Dalvin Tomlinson also came in at 60 and Leonard Williams came in at 74. So I think those two guys might be interchangeable. I think Dexter Lawrence could fill Dalvin Tomlinson's role, and they could go and say in a third-round pick, use that third-round pick, and maybe you draft a big run-stopping defensive tackle they can plug in there and play. Or they have B.J. Hill who can rotate in. I think that Dalvin Tomlinson's better. But I do want to argue against Dalvin. So, Anthony, what is a reason that you would move on from Dalvin and maybe take that money and say, let's spend it on a wide receiver like Allen Robinson or Kenny Golladay? Do you think that's something that they could do or should do?
Yeah, I think that's really the argument. If you're arguing to move on from Dalvin Tomlinson, it has nothing to do with him on the field. He's extremely talented. It just has to do with the fact that we already have other good guys at that position, and you don't want to overspend in one positional group and not be able to allocate any resources to other positional groups. So if the Giants feel like they have to get the wide receiver position bolstered up this offseason, they might want to spend money there and then hold the money away from Dalvin Tomlinson, maybe give him a team-friendly contract offer and see if he takes it. But, that's a deal that I don't think gets done until free agency begins, if it gets done. But at that point as well, if it doesn't get done before free agency, I feel like it's very likely that another team is going to recognize Dalvin Tomlinson's talents and scoop him up before we even have a chance to give him a team-friendly contract offer. So I think, when you look at Dave Gettleman especially, and, he has an extreme love for hog mollies and defensive linemen. He's invested a ridiculous amount of assets into the Giants' defensive line, and he invested a lot of assets into Carolina's defensive line when he was over there. That's something that he just, for some reason, continues to do. He finds it to be just very important, and it is. The defensive line is important. Building through the trenches is important. So I won't put it past him to get both of these guys locked down into contract extensions, but I do feel as though Dave Gettleman's going to prioritize signing Leonard Williams. You look at the statistics, you look at the impact that he had in this defense, and you look at what we gave up to get him, and we put him on the franchise tag this year after trading a third and a fifth-round pick for him, so we gave up a lot to get Leonard Williams, and I think it would be kind of a waste to just watch him walk away in free agency and go sign this huge contract after only one successful season with the Giants. So I think for sure he gets re-signed to an extension. I think at least 3 years. I think it should probably be a 3-year deal. And then Dalvin Tomlinson is really a coin toss. I think it's 50-50. I think you're going to have to see how the wide receiver market shapes out. If Allen Robinson surprises everybody and just signs a contract extension with the Bears, and then Kenny Golladay gets franchise tagged, and then Chris Godwin somehow resigns with the Bucks, and if the market just shrinks up before it even opens, then I could see the Giants just making the decision to keep Dalvin Tomlinson and look at the wide receiver position in the draft. As you mentioned, this is a rich wide receiver draft class, and the Giants will definitely be able to find somebody really talented at number 11, whether that be one of the big three, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, or Devontae Smith. Or if they, wait till round 2, there's a lot of really good names out there that Alex and I are going to break down and get into on the YouTube channel. Armand St. Brown, I like him. Rashad Bateman, I know that somebody in the comment section mentioned him and wants to see him more.
Marshall.
So Terrace Marshall, that's Alex's guy. There's a lot of just talented wide receivers out there in this draft class. So it could be something where the Giants just say, let's get our guys that we have in-house to stay in-house and then find these pieces in the draft.
That's exactly right. Like, that is what I've seen so far from the Giants brass. They want to keep their guys in-house. Think about Logan Ryan. They didn't even let him leave the building. They were like, we are re-signing him before he is a key cog to this defense. And I agree with you. I could see them going 3 years, $60 million for Leonard Williams and just backloading the contract, because ultimately when you backload the contract, it's going to help them if they want to go. Let's say they pull the opposites, right? Let's say they sign a wide receiver and they front load that deal, but they sign Leonard Williams and they backload that deal because it's going to be more expensive, and they're just going to heavily guarantee it because he's never missed a game. He's never missed a game due to injury, so they're not worried. Most times, you're afraid of backloading contracts because you're afraid of injury. That's a primary reason. You want to get the money out of the way now because it's the guarantees, and if you guarantee them a guy like Leonard Williams a ton of money, which is going to happen because they're not afraid of the injuries, that's a good thing. You want him to be on the field and they feel confident giving him that money. If you front load a wide receiver contract and you backload a Leonard Williams contract, you could find a way to pull it off and get all three of them, including Dalvin Tomlinson. I just don't think they have the money to do it. Now is the time to spend, though, with Daniel Jones on his rookie deal. Now is the time to spend. And I also want to list off a couple of players that are going to be opening up cap space for us. They're likely going to cut Nate Solder post June 1st. So that's $10 million you have opening up. You have the $16.1 million opening up from Leonard Williams franchise tag. You have $6 million opening up from Golden Tate, who's going to be cut. You have $4.6 million from Kyler Fackrell. And you probably have a couple more million scattered across the board in terms of just some plug-and-play players like here and there. But overall, that's 6, that's 4, so that's already 10, and then there's another 10 from Nate Solder. That's $20 million you have opening up. And that's all of that money is going to be allocated toward Leonard Williams for the most part. Now, if they backload it to the second and third year like they did with Logan Ryan's deal, it opens up the opportunity to sign a guy like Kenny Golladay. And that's where the one-year deals come into play, by the way. Like, this is something I've been saying. Kenny Golladay was injured a lot in 2020. He's coming off his rookie deal. He could sign a one-year prove-it deal with the Giants and then cash that in 2022 when the market goes like way higher because of COVID. They went down because of COVID this year, but it's gonna, once that's over, the vaccines hopefully take shape and really help the country and stuff, and the NFL's making normal money again. The cap space will rise up to like $200 million. And then suddenly, you're going to see players maxing out their deals, breaking records and stuff like that. I think Kenny Golladay would benefit from doing something like that. And if the Giants took Dalvin Tomlinson, took Leonard Williams, backloaded their deals 2 or 3 years, and then signed a one-year deal for Kenny Golladay, and then just used that money in 2021, they could pull it off. They could pull off getting all three of those guys. And Anthony continues to mention that they were connected to Kenny Golladay. They were looking to trade for him at the deadline. So there is interest there. He is that big body threat. And then you go to the 11th pick in the draft and you're like, okay, we'll get a speed guy like Jalen Waddle, or maybe Devonta Smith falls, or Kyle Pitts, another weapon like that. You have Saquon Barkley coming back. You're in pretty damn good shape. They could pull it off as long as they can find a receiver who's good enough that is willing to settle for 1 year. Do you think that that's something that they could do? Like, Kenny Golladay would be interested in signing a one-year deal. I think this is the best time to do it, especially since the cap's going down. There's not a lot of teams that are going to be looking to spend big money right now on a receiver who's coming off an injury-riddled season.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think that Kenny Golladay will look to sign a one-year deal. I just think, if he wanted to do that, he would just play on the franchise tag in Detroit and prove himself that way. But anything's possible. But really, to speak on what you've mentioned, the cap space is a number that teams have to follow, but it's also kind of an imaginary number. You've kind of mentioned that there's always something that you can do. There's always a way that you can format this contract and structure this contract. Now, of course, it sets into reality pretty quickly for some teams like the Saints and, Philadelphia. But really, the Giants have a lot of flexibility. There are players that they can cut. There are players that they can trade, and if they wait till a certain date, they can cut them and have a much less severe punishment, Like, there's always something that you can do. So if the Giants really do feel like they can fit these guys under the books, then they will, they'll do it. And they'll figure out a way to keep these guys and maybe even get a receiver as well. But I think with Kenny Golladay, in terms of signing with the Giants, I don't think a one-year deal would make sense, because then you can't, whatever the salary cap hit is, that's just what it is. There's no way to, move that down the road or adjust that and backload it or anything.
That was the point of putting Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson, setting their contract, the majority of their money, to year 2 and 3. That way you can fit that 1-year deal in for Kenny Golladay.
But then what do you do next year? And then you want to
But then,
you want to
you're
re-sign
expecting the
Kenny
cap to
Galladay
go
to a
up,
longer deal. But then what if he walks away? It's like, I think just the
then you
assurance of
sign
having
that
a guy around for more than, but
Well,
you want a revolving door of talented
if it's a prove it
receivers
deal,
for
you
Daniel
could
Jones.
do it. If it's a prove it deal, you could re-sign him, especially since the cap is going up. It's actually the perfect time. They'll have the money to do it.
To me, though, Kenny Galladay's already proven it. He just got hurt this year, but he was healthy his previous years, and he was kind of dominant at times. But
he won't get big money, is what I'm saying. Like next
really
year, I don't think he'll get big
season,
money because of the cap.
He dominated. The cap might make things difficult for a lot of players, and I think a lot of players are going to go into the market expecting to get big money, and they're going to get Jadeveon Clowney, and they're not going to get the contract that they want, and they might sit around, and then and Jadeveon Clowney is a guy that we can have a whole nother discussion about, but I think that these players might just value the assurance of having the long-term money in a time like this, because you never know, what if this COVID thing doesn't really go away in the timetable that we expect it to. So just having the assurance of knowing I'm going to get paid $20 million a year for the next 3 years, I'm okay with that, rather than trying to test my luck with all the other conditions lying around in the world that could potentially lower your contract further in the future. So I think with Galladay, like I mentioned, he was injured this year, but before he got injured, he was dominating, and he was dominant in his previous seasons when he was healthy. I just think he had one bad injury, and I don't think that takes away from the fact that he is a proven commodity, and he is going to make a lot of money on the open market, I believe, if he ever gets there, and I think that it will be a long-term deal.
Yeah, I mean, look, anything is possible at this point. He could absolutely land a long-term deal. He could land a one-year deal. We're going to see. It's really impossible to tell what the market's going to look like, how teams are actually going to utilize their cap space, because as we saw in Major League Baseball, the hot stove months, everything got pushed back weeks and weeks and weeks. The Yankees and everybody just started making moves this past Friday. It's been a long time. Usually, they signed Garrett Cole by this time last year. So it was a lot happened like instantly at the same time, and it really just, you never know when it's going to happen. The offseason is going to be really interesting as we figure out, how COVID is still influencing everything, what they expect the attendance rates to be next year, what they expect their money to look like. So that's going to play a big part in how they maneuver. But for the most part, I do think it could go either way. It could be 1 year deal. It could be a multi-year deal. We'll see what happens there. But there is one more scenario I do want to discuss before, I think we've covered most of it. What is the probability that the Giants actually move on from Leonard Williams? Because maybe they don't want to pay him more than Chris Jones is making. Chris Jones is obviously and historically a better player. He's been more consistent. Leonard Williams has one great season to his name. And he was double teamed the least out of any of the interior linemen. But like I mentioned, I think that was more schematically to get him into 1v1 situations. So I don't actually consider that much of an actual factor. But, one great season. I don't know how much is that worth to you in terms of, actually the value that he will earn this offseason in a big contract. Maybe he's looking for 4 or 5 years. I'm not giving him a 5-year deal from the Giants. 3 years max, in my opinion, because that's where they want to stick with. James Bradbury got that. Blake Martinez got that. I think if you fully guarantee the contract over 3 years, he would do it. But $20 million a year is a lot of money. It's a ton of money. Do you think he deserves that much money, though? And maybe in this market, he wouldn't. But I think he should be in the 18 million range. I think 20 million is a little bit overvalued.
It's difficult because, he's probably not worth that money, but is it worth it for the Giants to have good players? Like, if you look at this roster, he's arguably the best player on it,
I would agree.
The top 3 for sure, right? So, sometimes you just have to overpay to keep your talented players on the team, and not lose talent. And, the Giants in the past with Dave Gettleman haven't really been willing to overpay. They let Landon Collins walk, and, good thing they did, because that contract was ridiculous and everything in between. But, with Leonard Williams, I just can't see him leaving the Giants. I know, in terms of his leadership, a lot of it is, we as fans or analysts will look at it and we'll say they can afford to let him go and put this money elsewhere and whatever, but those guys in the building might not see it that way. They might see it as seeing Leonard Williams at work every day was my favorite part about being on the Giants. They might have that kind of feeling about Leonard Williams, and they might say, I need to keep this guy in the building. It's just a great culture fit, and we love coaching him and having him on the field. He's so easy to work with. Patrick Graham might have a lot of input in that and say, he makes my defense special. That's what I need is Leonard Williams. So, when we look at that, and the Giants really did give up a lot to get him, the 3rd and the 5th round pick, and then the franchise tag, everything in between. I think that they're just going to prioritize keeping him around and not letting him walk after a year and a half with the team. Especially when you look at all of the things that people have to say about him, he definitely is beloved within the organization. They want him around for the long-term future, and I just get the sense that they are going to get a deal done, and hopefully they'll get it done soon.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think his value to the team is exponential. We've seen it this past year, but what I will say is it all comes down to coaching. It always comes down to coaching. Players with bad coaches do not perform well, for the most part. There are some exceptions, but a guy like Leonard Williams, we've seen what good coaching does. Patrick Graham has actually signed an extension to stay with the Giants, and if that tells anything to me, it pretty much guarantees Leonard Williams is not going anywhere, because we've seen what he's done in 1 year with a new scheme, with new coaches, new teammates, and he excelled. I only imagine it's going to get better and better and better, and he's going to become more comfortable in the system with familiar faces around. And it's all about continuity. The Giants don't want to take their rebuild and continue to rotate players, right? That's the thing about a rebuild. You want to have continuity. You want to have consistency. And if the Giants are constantly rotating players in and out that are new faces and it's a new scheme for them, they're never going to have any continuity. So I 100% agree with you that I hope they get this deal done soon, because letting him walk would probably be a catastrophic thing for the defense. And I think Patrick Graham, really, he looked even better than he was, basically because of Leonard Williams, because how valuable he was in his production. So I agree with you there. But as always, guys, thank you so much for the support. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. Hope you got a little insight into what we think is going to happen with Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson. We both think that they will probably both end up re-signing with the Giants, or at least hopefully they will, because I've heard that they're really, really good friends now over this past year and a half. They've become very close. And you don't want to mess with that dynamic duo. We remember the Linval-Joseph, they let him walk, and you see what happened there. It really came back to bite us in the butt. So those type of things, you keep your best players, you keep your strongest links, you keep those strong. You don't make it a weak link. They have to keep that consistency, because ultimately in a rebuild, you don't want to be destroying the only good thing that your team is showing. So as always, guys, thank you so much, and we will catch you guys on the next one.